My name is Barrington Braithwaite. I'm a writer, an artist, and a founder member of ACDA. I've served in various capacities in the organization, and I've been on the steering committee, and I've created imagery that was necessary for the mandate of ACDA, and designed imagery also. Illustrations, in fact.
Brother Barry, you've been a long member of ACDA from the very, very beginning. Therefore, I want to ask you, what made you come together to form the organization? What was the idea behind it? And what motivated you to be a part of the formation?
Well, I evolved as a youngster in the arts and a writer, and I lived also in South Georgetown, which is areas from Hatfield Street to La Penitence. And I recognized that there was a consensus of defining African people in the context of a colonial heritage of deformations, of constructed fictions that were leveled against the African existence. Also in the churches that there was also, every painting you saw had pictures that there were no Africans there. My father, who I didn't grow with, but I visited, told me, "Why you go to church?" I said, "But you got to go to church." He said, "You know, every nation, call the names of 4 peoples or 4 nations or 4 kingdoms, 4 prominent kingdoms mentioned in the Bible." And I immediately said Egypt, Ethiopia, Elam, and Punt. I said, and he smiled. He said, "You're a bright boy." He said, "Where those nations exist?" And that was a stopper. He said, "They're in Africa. All of them in Africa. All of them is black people. Show me any pamphlet that the church hand out that show you those people." And I stopped going to church. And I did anthropology, and I recognized that we in Guyana, because I centered my focus on Guyana, had some serious problems of fragmentation. The society was fragmented. And I learned, because I started reading. A friend bought a book for me called Myth of African Civilization by Chikante Diop. It took me 3 years to read the book. There was I couldn't get the geography right. Some of the places he was talking about in that book I didn't know exist. And I started questioning, why was that so? There was nothing I learned in school that defined that.
So that prompted you to get into ACDA?
That prompted me to do. When I came into ACDA, I brought the resources. And I said, ACDA wasn't created, ACDA was compelled into being because of the reality that we were existing in. And I want to give an example that we can empathize with a newspaperman that I approached to get 2 of my illustrated work, the storytelling work, into his papers. One was The Shadow of the Jaguar, and the other was The Mighty Economy. Both of them were published subsequently. And he said, "None of that is going into my paper." And to my memory, he approached ACDA and said, we want to do an illustrated story of a black woman Who husband left she and she selling on the pave, and Akdo responded, if you do that, we will picket you, because that is not so. And it isn't so. Most of the women on the pave, the husbands just pick them up in the evening with a taxi, or it's what they do. And it's what we have been doing, because my late brother went to Libya and he came back and told me, he said, I met an African, and he said, I can tell you where the tribes are. There are women who tie their head and like to sell. He said they're from Doheny. And then he started telling him our actions. And he was pinning it on different tribal groups. So ACDA was not created out of fiction. ACDA was compelled to exist because it had to exist. It had to do what it had to do. Because we are cornered. We are still cornered by a lot of mythology.
Do you think it's important to African values?
It's important. I think ACDA is important. They might not acknowledge ACDA, the name, but the work we have done has empowered them. I can see them arguing. I listened to, while in a minibus, a young lady talking about African clothes that are that she is selling and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, before, one of the things when we were heading for the first emancipation, most African people were saying, black people ain't gonna wear African clothes. They're not gonna wear African clothes. And today, we're seeing our young people walking casually in the streets with the African head ties and stuff like that. And we have done work. Regardless of whether we are acclaimed faith while we live, we will be acclaimed faith, because somebody's going to ask the question, when did we start doing this?
What does emancipation, since you mentioned emancipation there, what does it mean to you, and what do you think it should mean to the African Guyans collective?
Emancipation is pivotal, because emancipation demonstrated that African people who were living in villages that were not villages, take that back. They were living on plantations, would walk to Georgetown to sell on the Sunday market. And as a result of that, save their money. Their main market was the ships, because at that point the ships there was no refrigeration. So the ships needed fresh goods, limes, oranges, lemons, chickens, eggs, and stuff like that. And they would save that money. And so that when emancipation came, they were able to buy plantations that had gone turned turtle because of a change of policy towards the purchasing of rice, of sugar in England. England was going now into a new era, and they needed subjects and not slaves. So they were going into the era of the industrial era, where they would be producing lots of stuff to sell. And emancipation brought that. The immediate post-emancipation, in what the jobs that Africans and the services that Africans provided, that the free people provided in the towns of Georgetown and New Amsterdam, is essential to capture in memory and to understand that this industry, this business industry, that the myth is that Africans don't do good in business. Yes, they do. They piloted it in this country, but it was scheming that undermined them and forced them into the public service. And when they went into public service, they became the first teachers. They became the first in every area. So Emancipation also is a landmark for retrospect, because when we were slaves, we understood what we were. If you go into the archives, you would see in the newspapers, they would say, oh, there's a slave pretending to be free, and he looks like this and he looks like that. And then you would be surprised and see that the slaves were of various types, and that they did escape from the plantation and come to town and seek jobs as free people. The other area is post-emancipation produced a peculiar character. It produced the colonial. The colonial was an imposition of the British class category into our, and it did not serve us well. It is the very ethos of our political being began with grassroots people in Charlestown, etc.
Just to bring you back to emancipation, the first set of emancipation, the first time that ACTO started to do emancipation, what are your early memories of that? Anything stand out to you?
Well, I'll tell you what stood out. The second emancipation, the second time we did emancipation, brought into focus an importation of African, well, it was not real African cloth, but African prints. I could remember every store had, and they didn't have enough. There were African prints that when they made the first kaftan and you washed it, everything washed out. But it demonstrated that there was a recognition that this thing that ACDA did here is here to stay. So the commercial people got onto it. Then we had requests for turbans, who can tie head ties, and there were a whole set of movement. So that was like pivotal, that transformation, that awareness, while we were tasked with defining how we're going to celebrate the special village, how we're going to celebrate other things, there was that movement. And that is remarkable.
Thank you. Is there any stories or memories of being a part of ACTA that stands out? Any special memory?
Yes, I was surprised when we were tasked with, okay, anything happened socially, especially with our people, grassroots people, ACTA became the first place they stood. And I think that didn't work very well for us with the political people, because we were doing their work for them and they were not very comfortable with it. And I can tell you what stands out pivotally and in a very profound way: the killing of young Jermaine Wilkinson. And ACTA's part in organizing the justice for Jermaine in the era of extrajudicial killings. And when I went to, it began to a part when I decided I'm going to go to Mr. Hoyt. Up to then, they had seemed fossilized, not knowing how to deal with it. And when I got there, I sat down and I told him, we want you to come into Albaistown. And there were several men around him who started, no, you can't go there. That is Hamilton Green's area. Up to that time, Hamilton Green had not visited us. And I was like, what is going on? The political thing had taken an entire, had been transferred into a dimension of its own. And Desmond Hoyle looked at me and turned to Ronald Austin and said, Ronald, what do you think I should do? And Ronald said, I think you should, he was the only man who was silent, I think you should go with Barry. And Mr. Hoyt asked me how you came. I said, I came with my motorcycle. He said, will you take us? And I took them to All Boys Town. And
so that's one of your earliest memory that you think was profound.
That was a profound memory. It was not the earliest memory, but it was a profound memory in that of a divide, of a fragmentation between the political hierarchy and the people. And I've seen other parties jump on that wagon in respect to stuff, but also when we made the recommendations to the joint service, I can't remember what it was called, but we had to make some recommendations to joint service changes because it had become important, because what had happened is that was not being taken into consideration. The drug business had produced a nouveau riche of businesses who were recruiting policemen. And we came into that, we became entrapped in that, and we had to find our way. And we had to do what we had to do.
So even emancipation, as we're moving towards emancipation right now, what are your words for that? During COVID,
Emancipation has to be celebrated. It is, remember I had coined a name for it, the genesis of modern Guyana?
Yes.
It is the genesis of modern Guyana.
That's a good point to stop. Emancipation is the genesis.
It is the genesis of modern. After emancipation, all else fell in place.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.